Chapter 8, Part 2 of Gigolo by Edna Ferber. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. If I Should Ever Travel, Part 2. The first thing Maxine said as they rode in a taxi to the hotel was, "But the streets are paved." Then, "But it's all electric lighted with cluster lights." And in final and utter disgust, "Why, there's a movie sign that says The Perils of Pauline. That was showing at the Elite on 43rd Street in Chicago just the night before we left." Millie Pardee smiled grimly. "Palestine's paved too," she observed, "and they're probably running that same reel there next week." Millie Pardee and her husband had a plain talk. Next day, Sam Pardee rented the two-story frame house in which, for years, the famous Pardee dinners were to be served, but that came later. The house was rented with the understanding that the rent was to be considered as payment made toward final purchase. The three lived there in comfort. Maxine went to the new pressed brick, many-windowed high school. Millie Pardee was happier than she had been in all her wedded life. Sam Pardee had made no fortune in oil, though he talked in terms of millions. In a burst of temporary prosperity, due to a boom in some oil stocks Sam Pardee had purchased early in the game, they had paid $5,000 down on the house and lot. That left a bare $1,000 to pay. There were 3 good meals a day. Millie Pardee belonged to the Ocoochee Woman's Thursday Club. All the women in Ocoochee seemed to have come from St. Louis, Columbus, Omaha, Cleveland, Kansas City, and they spoke of these as back East. When they came calling, they left cards punctiliously. They played bridge, observing all the newest rulings, and speaking with great elaborateness of manner. "Yours, I believe, Miss Tutwiler?" "Pardon, but didn't you notice I played the ace?" Maxine graduated in white, with a sash. Mrs. Pardee was on the committee to beautify the grounds around the M.K.&T. railroad station. When relatives from back East, meaning Nebraska, Kansas, or Missouri, visited an Ocoocheeite, cards were sent out for an at-home, and everything was as formal as a court levee in Victoria's time. Mrs. Pardee began to talk of buying an automobile. The town was full of them. There were the flivvers and lower middle-class cars owned by small merchants, natives, anyone boasting 12 years' residence, and unsuccessful adventurers of the Sam Pardee type. Then there were the big, high-powered scouting cars driven by steely-eyed, wiry, cold-blooded young men from Pennsylvania and New York. These young men had no womenfolk with them, held conferences in smoke-filled rooms at the Okmulgee Hotel. The main business street was called Broadway, and the curb on either side was hidden by lines of cars drawn up slantwise at an angle. No farmer wagons. A small town with all the airs of a big one, with none of the charming informality of the old Southern small towns, none of the engaging ruggedness of the established Middle Western town, none of the faded gentility of the old New England town. A strident dame, this, in red satin and diamonds, insisting that she is a lady. Interesting withal, and bulging with personality and possibility. Millie Pardee loved it. She belonged. She was chairman of this committee and secretary of that. Ocoochee was always having parades with floats sponsored by the Chamber of Commerce of Ocoochee, and distinguished by schoolgirls grouped on bunting-covered motor trucks, their hair loose and lately relieved from crimpers, 3 or 4 inches of sensible shirt-sleeve showing below the flowing lines of their cheesecloth Grecian robes. Maxine was often one of these. Yes, Millie Pardee was happy. Sam Pardee was not. He began suddenly to talk of Mexico. Frankly, he was bored. For the first time in his life he owned a house, or nearly. There was $1,100 in the bank. Roast on Sunday. Bathroom shelf to be nailed Sunday morning. YMCA, Rotary Club, Knights of Columbus, Kiwanis, Boy Scouts. "Hell," said Sam Pardee, "this town's no good." Millie Pardee took a last stand. "Sam Pardee, I'll never leave here. I'm through traipsing up and down the world with you like a gypsy. I want a home. I want to be settled. I want to stay here, and I'm going to." "You're sure you want to stay?" "I've moved for the last time. I'm going to plant a Burbank clamberer at the side of the porch, and they don't begin to flower till after the first 10 years. That's how sure I am." There came a look into Sam Pardee's eyes. He rubbed his neat brown derby round and round with his coat sleeve. He was just going out. "Well, that's all right. I just wanted to know. Where's Max?" "She stayed late. They're rehearsing for the pageant of progress down at the library." Sam Pardee looked thoughtful, a little regretful, one might almost have said. Then he clapped on the brown derby, paused on the top step of the porch to light his cigar, returned the greeting of young Arnold Hatch, who was sprinkling the lawn next door, walked down the street with the quick, nervous step that characterized him, boarded the outgoing train for God knows where, and was never heard from again. "Well," said the worse-than-widowed, it was her own term, "we've got the home." She set about keeping it. We know that she had a gift for cooking that amounted almost to culinary inspiration. Pardee's dinners became an institution in Okuchi. Mrs. Pardee cooked, Maxine served, and not even the great new stucco palaces on the Edgecombe Road boasted finer silver, more exquisite napery. As for the food, old Clem Barstow himself, who had a chef and a butler, and sent east for lobster and squabs weekly, came to Pardee's when he wanted a real meal. From the first they charged $1.50 for their dinners. Okuchi, made mellow by the steaming soup, the savoury meats, the bland sauces, and rich dessert, paid it ungrudgingly. They served only 18, no more, though Okuchi could never understand why. On each dinner Mrs. Pardee made a minimum of 75 cents. 18 times 75, naught, and carry the 4, naught, 5, 13.50, 7 times, well, $95 or thereabouts each week. It's not so bad. Out of this Mrs. Pardee managed to bank a neat sum. She figured that at the end of 10 or 15 years... "I hate them," said Maxine, washing dishes in the kitchen. "Greedy pigs." "They're nothing of the kind. They like good food, and I'm thankful they do. If they didn't, I don't know where I'd be. We might be anywhere, so long as it could be away from here. Dull, stupid, stick-in-the-muds, all of them. Why, they're no such thing, Maxine Pardee. They're from all over the world, pretty nearly. Why, just last Thursday there were 16 different states represented in the 18 people that sat down to dinner. Pooh, states! That isn't the world." "What is, then?" Maxine threw out her arms, sprinkling dishwater from her dripping finger-tips with the wide-flung gesture. "Cairo, Zanzibar, Brazil, Trinidad, Seville, Samarkand." "Where's Samarkand?" "I don't know. I'm going to see it all some day. And the different people, the people that travel, and know about what kind of wine with the roast, and the fish. You know, the kind in novels that say, 'You've chilled this sauterne too much, Beamish.'" "And when you do see these places," retorted Mrs. Pardee, with the bitterness born of long years of experience, "you'll find that in every one of them somebody's got a boarding-house called Pardee's, or something like that, where the people flock, same's they do here, for a good meal." "Yes, but what kind of people?" "Same kind that comes here." Sam Pardee had once taken his wife to see a performance of The Man from Home, when that comedy was at the height of its popularity. A line from this play flashed into Mrs. Pardee's mind now, and she paraphrased it deftly. "There are just as many kinds of people in Okuchi as there are in Zanzibar." "I don't believe it." "Well, it's so. And I'm thankful we've got the comforts of home." At this, Maxine laughed a sharp little laugh that was almost a bark. Perhaps she was justified. The 18 straggled in between 6 and 6:30 nightly, a mixture of townspeople and strangers. While Maxine poured the water in the dining-room, the neat little parlour became a mess. The men threw hats and overcoats on the backs of the chairs. Their rubbers slopped under them. They rarely troubled to take them off. While waiting avidly for dinner to be served, they struck matches and lighted cigarettes and cigars. Sometimes they called in to Maxine. "Say, girlie, when'll supper be ready? I'm 'bout gone." The women trotted upstairs, chattering, and primped and fussed in Maxine's neat and austere little bedroom. They used Maxine's powder, and dropped it about on the tidy dresser and the floor. They brushed away only what had settled on the front of their dresses. They forgot to switch off the electric light, leaving Maxine to do it thriftily between serving courses. Every penny counted. Every penny meant release. After dinner, Maxine and her mother sat down to eat off the edge of the kitchen table. It was often 9 o'clock before the last straggling diner, sprawling on the parlour davenport with his evening paper and cigar, departed, leaving Maxine to pick up the scattered newspapers, cigarette butts, ashes, straighten chairs, lock doors. Then the dishes. The dishes. When Arnold Hatch asked her to go to a movie, she shook her head, usually. "I'm too tired. I'm going to read in bed." Read, that's all you do. What are you reading?" "Oh, about Italy. La Belle Napoli." She collected travel folders, and often talked in their terms. In her mind, she always said, "Brooding Vesuvius, blue Mediterranean, azure coasts, Egypt's golden sands." Arnold Hatch ate dinner nightly at Pardee's. He lived in the house next door, which he owned, renting it to an Okuchi family, and retaining the upstairs front bedroom for himself. A tall, thin, eye-glassed young man, who worked in the offices of the Okuchi Oil and Refining Company, believed in Okuchi, and wanted to marry Maxine. He had twice kissed her. On both these occasions his eyeglasses had fallen off, taking the passion, so to speak, out of the process. When Maxine giggled uncontrollably, he said, "Go on, laugh. But some day I'm going to kiss you, and I'll take my glasses off first. Then look out." You have to have a good deal of humour to stand being laughed at by a girl you've kissed, especially a girl who emphasises her aloofness by wearing those high-collared white silk blouses. "You haven't got a goiter, have you?" said Arnold Hatch one evening, brutally. Then, as she had flared in protest, "I know it. I love that little creamy satin hollow at the base of your throat." "You've never The scarlet flamed up. She was human. "I know, but I love it just the same. Pretty good for a tall, thin young man who worked in the offices of the Okuchi Oil and Refining Company. Sometimes he said, 'I'm darned certain you like me,' bravely, 'love me. Why won't you marry me? Cut out all this slaving. I could support you. Not in much luxury, maybe, but—' And settle down in Okuchi? Never see anything? Stuck in this God-forsaken hole, this drab, dull, oil-soaked village, when there are wonderful people, wonderful places, colour, romance, beauty, Damascus, Mandalay, Singapore, Hong Kong. Hong Kong! It sounds like a temple bell. It thrills me." "Over in Hong Kong," said Arnold Hatch, "I expect some Chinese Maxine Pardee would say, 'Oh, Coochie, it sounds like an Indian war drum. It thrills me.'" Sometimes Maxine showed signs of melting, but she always congealed again under the influence of her resolve. One evening, an out-of-town diner, on hearing her name, said, "Pardee, probably a corruption of Pardieu, a French name originally, I suppose." After that, there was no approaching her for a week. Maxine Pardieu. Pardieu. By God, it meant. A chevalier he must have been, this Pardieu, a musketeer, a swashbuckler, with lace falling over his slim white hand, and his hand always ready on his sword. Red heels, plumed hat. Pardieu! How she hated anew the great oil tanks that rose on the town's outskirts, guarding it like giant sentinels. The new houses, the new country club. 21 miles of asphalt road. Population in 1900, only 467. In 1920, over 35,000. Slogan, "Watch us grow." 1,700 oil and gas wells. Fields of corn and cotton. Skyscrapers. The Watanga Building, 12 stories. Haynes Block, 14 stories. Come west, young man. Ugh! Sometimes she made little rhymes in her mind. There's Singapore and Zanzibar and Cairo and Calais. There's Samarkand and Alcazar, Rangoon and Mandalay. "Yeah," said Arnold Hatch one evening, when they were talking in the Pardee backyard. It was 9 o'clock. Dishes done. A moon. October. Maxine had just murmured her little quatrain. They were standing by the hedge of pampas grass that separated the Pardee yard from Hatch's next door. "Yeah," said Arnold Hatch. "Likewise. There's Seminole and Shawnee, Apache, Agawam. There's Agua and Pawnee, Wallonga, Wakitam." He knew his Oklahoma. "Oh!" exclaimed Maxine, in a little burst of fury, and stamped her foot down hard. Squish! said something underfoot. "Oh!" said Maxine again, in surprise this time. October was a dry month. She peered down. Her shoe was wet. A slimy something clung to it. A scummy something shone, reflected in the moonlight. She had not lived 10 years in Oklahoma for nothing. Arnold Hatch bent down. Maxine bent down. The greasy wet patch lay just between the two backyards. They touched it, fearfully, with their forefingers. Then they straightened and looked at each other. Oil. Oil. Things happened like that in Oklahoma. You didn't try to swing a thing like that yourself. You leased your land for a number of years. A well cost between $40,000 and $60,000. You leased to a company represented by one or two of those cold-blooded, steely-eyed young men from Pennsylvania or New York. There was a good deal of trouble about it, too. This was a residence district, one of the oldest in this new town. But they bought the Pardee place and the Hatch place, and Arnold Hatch, who had learned a thing or two in the offices of the Okuchi Oil and Refining Company, drove a hard bargain for both. The yard was overrun with drillers, lawyers, engineers, superintendents, foremen, and machinery. Arnold came with papers to sign. 500 a day, he said, and a percentage. He named the percentage. Maxine and her mother repeated this after him, numbly. Mrs. Pardee had been the bookkeeper in the Pardee ménage. She tried some mathematical gymnastics now, and bumped her arithmetical nose. 500 a day, including Sundays, Arnold? Including Sundays. Her lips began to move. 7 times 5, 3,500, 52 times 30... She stopped, overcome. But she began again, wildly, as a thought came to her. Why, I could build a house! A house up on Edgecombe. A house like the Barstows, with lawns and gardens and sleeping porches and linen closets. Oh, Maxine, we'll live there. Not I, said Maxine crisply. Arnold, watching her, knew what she was going to say before she said it. I'm going to see the world. I want to penetrate a civilization so old that its history wanders down the centuries and is lost in the dim mists of mythology. See Baedeker. Sudden wealth had given Arnold a new masterfulness. Marry me before you go. Not at all, replied Maxine. On the boat, going over. Over where? Honolulu, on my way to Japan. I'll meet a tall, bearded stranger, sunburned, with the flame of the Orient in his eyes, and on his thin, cruel, sensual mouth. Arnold Hatch took off his glasses. Maxine stiffened. Don't you... But she was too late. There, said Arnold. He'll have to have some beard and some flame and some thin, cruel, sensual mouth to make you forget that one. Maxine started, alone, against her mother's remonstrances. Being an inexperienced traveller, she took a good many trunks, and was pretty unpopular with the steward before he could make her understand that one trunk to the stateroom was the rule. On the first 2 days out on the way to the Hawaiian Islands, she spent all her time, which was 24 hours a day, in her bed, hoping that Balboa was undergoing fitting torment in punishment for his little joke about discovering the so-called Pacific Ocean. But the swell subsided, and the wind went down, and Maxine appeared on deck, and in another 12 hours had met everyone, from the purser to the honeymoon couple, in the surprising way one does on these voyages. She looked for the tall, bearded stranger with the sunburn of the Orient and the thin, cruel, sensual lips, but he didn't seem to be about. Strangely enough, everyone she talked to seemed to be from Nebraska or Kansas or Iowa or Missouri. Not only that, they all were very glib with names and places that had always seemed mythical and glamorous. Oh, yes, Mr. Tannenbaum and I went to India last year, and Persia, and around. Real interesting. My, but they're dirty, those towns. We used to kick about Des Moines, now that they use so much soft coal, and all the manufacturing and all. But, my land, it's paradise compared to those places. And the food, only decent meals we had in Egypt was a place in Cairo called Pardee's, run by a woman whose husband left her or died or something. Real home-loving woman she was. Such cooking. Why, that's so. Your name's Pardee, too, isn't it? Well, I always say to Mr. Tannenbaum, it's a small world, after all. No relation, of course? Of course not. How suddenly safe Oklahoma seemed, and Arnold Hatch. Where you going from Honolulu, Miss Pardee? Samarkand. Beg pardon? Samarkand. Oh, yeah, Let's see now, where's that exactly? I used to know, but I'm such a hand for forgetting. I don't know, said Maxine distinctly. Don't. But I thought you said you were going. I am, but I don't know where it is. Then how? You just go to an office where there are folders and a man behind the desk, and you say you want to go to Samarkand, and he shows you. You get on a boat. That's all. The people from Iowa and Kansas and Nebraska and Missouri said, oh, yes, and there was nothing like travel, so broadening. Maxine asked them if they knew about the Vale of Kashmir, and one of them, astoundingly enough, did. A man from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, who had spent a year there superintending the erection of a dredge. A plump man, with eyeglasses, and perpetually chewing a dead cigar. Gold and sunlight, myrrh and incense, the tinkling of anklets. Maxine clung to these wildly in her mind. But Honolulu, the Moana Hotel on Waikiki Beach, reassured her. It was her dream come true. She knew it would be so when she landed and got her first glimpse of the dark-skinned natives on the docks, their hats and necks laden with leis of flowers. There were palm trees. There were flaming hibiscus hedges. Her bed was canopied with white netting, like that of a princess. The attendant explained it was to keep out the mosquitoes. You ate strange fruits. They grew a little sickening after a day or two. You saw Duke, the Hawaii world champion swimmer, come in on a surfboard, standing straight and slim and naked, like a god of bronze, balancing miraculously on a plank carried in on the crest of a wave with the velocity of a steam engine. You saw Japanese women in tight kimonos and funny little stilted flapping footgear, running to catch a streetcar. And you laughed at the incongruity of it. You made the 3-day trip to the living volcano at Hilo, and sat at the crater's brink, watching the molten lava lake tossing, hissing, writhing. You hung there between horror and fascination. Certainly a pretty sight, isn't it? Said her fellow travellers. Makes the Grand Canyon look sick, I think, don't you? I've never seen it. Oh, really? On her return from Hilo, she saw him. A Van Dyke beard, smouldering eyes, thin red lips, lean, nervous hands, white flannel evening clothes, sunburned a rich brown. Maxine drew a long breath, as if she had always been running. It was after dinner. The broad veranda was filled with gaily gowned women, uniformed officers from the fort, tourists in white. They were drinking their after-dinner coffee, smoking, laughing. The Hawaiian orchestra made ready to play for the dancing on the veranda. They began to play. Their ukuleles throbbed and moaned. The musicians sang in their rich melodious voices some native song of a lost empire and a dead king. It tore at your heart. You ached with the savage beauty of it. It was then she saw him. He was seated alone, smoking, drinking, watching the crowd with amused, uneager glance. She had seen him before. It was a certainty, this feeling. She had known him, seen him before. Perhaps not in this life, perhaps only in her dreams. But they had met. She stared at him until her eye caught his. It was brazen, but she was shameless. Nothing mattered. This was no time for false modesty. Her eyes held his. Then, slowly, she rose, picked up her trailing scarf, and walked deliberately past him, glancing down at him as she passed. He half rose, half spoke. She went down the steps leading from the veranda to the courtyard, down this walk to the pier, down the pier to the very end, where the little roofed shelter lay out in the ocean, bathed in moonlight, fairy-like, unreal. The ocean was a thing of molten silver. The sound of the wailing voices in song came to her on the breeze, agonizing in its beauty. There beyond lay Pearl Harbor. From the other side, faintly, you heard the music and laughter from the yacht club. Maxine seated herself. The after-dinner couples had not yet strolled out. They were waiting for the dancing up there on the hotel veranda. She waited. She waited. She saw the glow of his cigar as he came down the pier, a tall, slim, white figure in the moonlight. It was just like a novel. It was a novel come to life. He stood a moment at the pier's edge, smoking. Then he tossed his cigar into the water, and it fell in with a little st. He stood another moment, irresolutely. Then he came over to her. "Nice night." In Okuchi you would have said, "Sir," but not here. Not now. Not Maxine, pardieu. "Yes, isn't it?" The mellow moon fell full on him, bronzed, bearded, strangely familiar. At his next question she felt a little faint. "Haven't we met before?" She toyed with the end of her scarf. "You feel that, too?" He nodded. He took a cigarette from a flat platinum case. "Mind if I smoke? Perhaps you'll join me?" Maxine took a cigarette, uncertainly, lighted it from the match he held, put it to her lips, coughed, gasped. "Maybe you're not used to those. I smoke a cheap cigarette because I like 'em. Dromedaries, those are. 18 cents a package." Maxine held the cigarette in her unaccustomed fingers. Her eyes were on his face. "You said you thought, you felt, we'd met before?" "I may be mistaken, but I never forget a face. Where are you from, may I ask?" Maxine hesitated a moment. "Oklahoma." He slapped his leg a resounding thwack. "I knew it. I hardly ever mistaken. Name's, wait a minute, Pardee, isn't it?" "Yes, but how—" "One of the best meals I ever had in my life, Miss Pardee. 2 years ago it was. I was lecturing on Tibet and the Far East." "Lecturing?" Her part of the conversation was beginning to sound a good deal like the dialogue in a badly written play. "Yes. I'm Brainerd, you know. I thought you knew when you spoke up there on the veranda." "Brainerd?" It was almost idiotic. "Brainerd. Paul Brainerd. The travelogue man. I remember I gave you and your mother complimentary tickets to the lecture. I've got a great memory. Got to have, in my business. Let's see, that town was—" "Okuchi," faintly. "Okuchi. That's it. It's a small world, after all, isn't it? Okuchi. Why, I'm on my way to Oklahoma now. I'm going to spend 2 months or more there, taking pictures of the vast oil fields, the oil wells. A new country. An Aladdin country. A new growth. One of the most amazing and picturesque bits in the history of our amazing country. History in the making. An empire overnight. Oklahoma. Well, what a relief after war-torn Europe and an outworn civilization. But you're from... I'm from East Orange, New Jersey, myself. Got a nice little place down there that I wouldn't swap for all the palaces of the kings. No, sir. All ready? Well, yes, it is a little damp out here. So close to the water. Mrs. Brainerd won't risk it. I'll walk up with you. I'd like to have you meet her. End of Chapter 8, Part 2. And End of Gigolo by Edna Ferber. Recording by Kirsten Wever.